Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Scrutiny and Audit Committee. I would remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I have agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking. For any members of the public watching, please note that all the public committee reports, including details of specific recommendations, are available on the Council's website. Thank you. Mrs Mackenzie, are there any apologies or substitutions, please?
Thank you, Convener. We have apologies from Councillors Proctor, with Councillor McLaren substituting.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest or statements of transparency? No, thank you. Members, we've got before us the minutes of the previous meeting, and we're asked that they're being submitted for approval as a correct record the minute of meeting of this committee of the 7th of March 2024. Are they agreed? Thank you very much. Agenda item number 4 is the possible exclusion of the public and press. The committee will be asked to consider in terms of Standing Order 27.2 whether the public and press should be excluded during consideration of item 14 so as to avoid the disclosure of information which is exempt in terms of Part 1 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Do we agree to exclude the public and press during consideration of item 14? Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item number 5 is the Angus Adult Protection Committee Annual Report, April 2022 to March 2023. And we have Mr John Cooper as the officer and Mr Ewan West, the independent chair. Good afternoon, Ewan.
Good afternoon, Convener, and thank you. I'm happy to present the 2022-23 Angus Adult Protection Annual Report today, and that covers the period of April 22 to March 23. My intention, Convener, was to highlight a number of points from the report, and then happy to answer any questions thereafter if that's okay with yourself. I think it's a very positive report, and I'll pick up on some of those notable points as we go through. The first section that I thought would be useful to discuss is the statistical information and data, which is set out in a chart on page 7 of the report. And members will see that the overall number of referrals has risen from the previous year of 681 to 840, which represents about an increase of 20% from the previous year. Last year, 21-22, had showed a drop from the previous year, from 728 to 681. However, we've exceeded the 728 quite significantly, 22 to 23, up to 840. Now, you can see clearly from the statistics there that a number of sources of these referrals from different agencies have increased quite significantly. So, for example, Health Acute has gone from 13 to 47. Health Primary has gone from 26 to 64. So those two alone from different areas of NHST side have contributed to quite a significant part of that increase. You also see, I think it's worth mentioning that reports from members of the public have risen from 7 to 28, so they've increased by 4 times, which for me is in some ways encouraging. It perhaps indicates that members of the public are more aware of how they can make referrals, and that process for them has hopefully been made a bit easier with the publicity and the different information that's been put out there as to how people can report their concerns. Care Inspectorate have contributed to an increase as well, but the big increase, as I say, is from NHS. I'm hoping to some extent that the trend reverses as we go forward, and that some of the earlier intervention work and preventative work that's now been in train for the last year or so starts to come to fruition. But that remains to be seen. But I'm confident that increase that's there, and that those 840 referrals have been dealt with timeously and professionally, and that we've had very good outcomes from those referrals in respect of the well-being and quality of life of the vulnerable adults that have been involved in those referrals. So I'd move on now to look at another key part of the report, and that was the national inspection that we had, which is commented upon in page 11 of the report going forward. Now, this was part of a national inspection that was conducted by the Care Inspectorate, and the findings were published in early 23. And I'm really pleased to report that this was an excellent report for Angus, and indeed it was one of the best in Scotland in terms of its outcomes. But particularly pleased that all of the hard work that really takes place every day in Angus by all our agencies was recognised, and it was evidenced and was clearly acknowledged by the Care Inspectorate in their findings. There's, as members will be aware, there's so much unseen work goes on to support vulnerable adults across both the statutory and voluntary sector, and people work really hard to help vulnerable adults and address their concerns. And I think that really came through in the report. But perhaps just to highlight one or two of the other key findings, which are listed in the report, I think is worthy of mentioning. We'll talk a lot about processes, and processes are important, and it was acknowledged that these were highly effective in Angus, and our management of risk was very strong. Clearly, some of the cases that are presented to staff and agencies, there is a very, very significant risk in many of those cases, and the fact that it was acknowledged that the management of risk was strong provides me with reassurance that clearly the care packages and the care planning that is in place is indeed very good. I think there was comment made on a couple of the observations made by the Care Inspectorate about the challenges of the pandemic and how that was well handled across Angus, and that's a bit historical now, but nevertheless it did impact on the workload then and going forward, but it did indicate, the report indicates that was done well across Angus. They felt that the delivery of inquiries, investigations and case conferences was very effective. So effectively that means that the daily work of investigation and subsequent follow-up at case conference and review case conference was indeed meeting the needs and fit for purpose. And I think the last point I would just want to make was around learning and development, which is really key to making sure our staff have all the tools and skills available to them to make sure that their practice is really good. And again, we got a really positive report on that from the Care Inspectorate, indicating that the learning and development that we had then, and it's been enhanced even more since then, had a very positive impact on adult support and protection. So all in all, I think it was a really good report, a really positive report. There were a very small number of improvements that we were asked to look at, which we did, and these are referred to in just after the inspection summary in the report. The improvement plan was submitted to the Care Inspectorate, and I can just update you as from last week. The Care Inspectorate have come back to me and said that they are very content that all the improvements that were recommended have been addressed and properly incorporated into practice, and they are happy to, and they were last week, they signed off the improvement plan. So actually, just a bit of an update to the report that has now been formally signed off, and that is the inspection process complete for Angus. So that was indeed good news also. I think it's worth mentioning, I think members will have heard me talking about the significant case review P19 previously. That was a major piece of work which resulted in 57 recommendations being made. I'm pleased to inform members that of those 59, we are now down to single figures in terms of implementation. So about 50 now have been not just embedded into practice, but what we've sought before these were signed off is evidence that actually these changes were making a positive or had made a positive impact on whether it was structure, process, or frontline delivery of services. So we've gone through that whole process and we've been able to sign off, as I say, over 50 of those. Those remaining, the next meeting to discuss the remaining recommendations is scheduled for next month, and I've been advised that it's likely we'll be down to one outstanding recommendation after that, which is a slightly longer piece of work, but you know, I'm absolutely delighted as chair that we've managed to make such positive progress and, you know, in a relatively short space of time for the number of recommendations that we've had to implement. And again, I would just want to pass on my thanks to everybody who has been involved in what has been a very significant piece of work and has helped us, I think, I'm pretty sure, to get the very good inspection report that I've already spoken about. Excuse me. So just to conclude, there's a section on page 20 of the report which talks about conclusions and next steps. And just to highlight one or two of those, our service user involvement and participation, that is moving forward, being led by Angus Independent Advocacy, and that's work in progress, and I'll be able to report further on that after the next reporting period. Self-evaluation, continuous improvement is absolutely vital to make sure that we continue to make sure that our processes, etc., are as strong as we can be. And although we got a very positive report, I think I'd want to reassure members that we're not resting on our laurels here. We recognise that we can still improve across different areas of adult protection, and we will continue to self-evaluate and make sure that we continue to deliver as best service we can to vulnerable adults. There's a second last bullet point there is about self-neglect and hoarding, which is becoming an emerging issue. And again, since this report was written, there's been a significant amount of work done, led by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service mainly, to highlighting the issues of hoarding and improving practice across the agencies. So just finally, Convener, I would just like to provide my reassurance to the committee, today, that I think adult protection in Angus is in a good place. I think the inspection report evidenced that, but to make sure that we continue to move forward and to make sure that all our operational delivery and our processes are as effective as they can be, to make sure that when referrals or are reported, we can deliver services that are really going to have a positive impact on the lives of vulnerable adults in the area. So we'll just leave it at that, Convener, if that's okay with yourself, and maybe John might want to add to some of my comments, but then happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Ewan. John, do you wish to add? Thank you.
always feel I should say something when I'm offered the opportunity. No, I would really concur with what Ewan has said. I think it's highlighted a lot of work, I would actually say a lot of passion as well from officers across various sectors that contribute to the adult protection agenda. And as Ewan said, it's been a good bit of news last week having the improvement plan signed off, which not only shows that we've taken on board some of the actions, but we've also, as Ewan said, embedded them within our practice across all the agencies that contribute to this really important piece of work in our communities. So I would just really echo what Ewan said so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bell, a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you very much, Ewan and John. Congratulations on the work that you've achieved and on the inspections feedback. I think that's really important. And I'm particularly pleased to see the recommendations around SCR P19 moving along. I know how significant that was. You mentioned that you hoped the next year's statistics would show a bit of a downward trend, Ewan, and I'm kind of torn in that at least the figures show people know the referral route when they have a concern, so that's a positive, but obviously the 20% increase is quite worrying. And I just wondered, given that we're past the year end now, do you have any sense of where that trend might be going at the moment? And also I'll sneak in another wee one. I remember last year I mentioned links with the Mental Welfare Commission, and there are 0 referrals across all 4 years there. Would you interpret that as a positive sign in that we're perhaps supporting people long before the Mental Welfare Commission would be required? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. In relation to the trend, whilst I don't have specific figures just yet, I know that the number of referrals, speaking to John's team, continues to they're still very busy in terms of accepting referrals. So I do agree with you. In some ways, it shows that people maybe more better understand how referrals can be made. Maybe there were referrals out there previously that hadn't been made, and we're now seeing a true figure. But that remains to be seen. What I would say, I think, Councillor, is that we've not probably seen a massive drop-off for the most recent period of 23 into 24. So when we do get the final figures, I wouldn't anticipate that 840 figure reducing massively. Once we get them, we'll be happy. I'll get them from John's team, and we'd be happy to circulate them to you before we get to this point next year. In terms of the Mental Welfare Commission numbers, I actually went to, a couple of months ago, went to a conference that they had held for the first time since the pandemic. And I know they are making inquiries and investigations into cases in other areas where they felt there have been some issues. We've not experienced that in Angus recently at all. So I'm going to take a positive from that, Councillor, that yes, our earlier intervention or interventions here in Angus are effective and are not resulting in then subsequent interventions by the Commission. I don't think it's the fact that the Commission are not, they're not reporting what they might see. I'm very assured that they would. And to have a 0 is in some ways a positive. So I'm going to take it like that. But I do know that the MWC would be, they wouldn't be sitting on their hands coming to us if there were issues, put it like that. So I'm going to take a positive that our work by John's agency and others is a positive. And we're getting there earlier. And what we are doing is that our interventions are effective.
Thank you very much. Councillor Devine. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks very much, Ewan, for a very positive report. You actually answered nearly all my questions anyway in your updates, and it's really good to hear about the feedback on the improvement plan and the ongoing engagement with service users, as well as the new initiative on hoarding and self-harm. I think that's really vital now. I was wondering, just two wee things. Are you quite happy about the transitions group that's away at the end of the report? That's always been an area of concern, I think. And my other question is right at the beginning on figure 1. The other, we've got a lot of different ways in which people can come forward with referrals, but this other has got 31 for 22-23, and it's quite a significant number. So I was just wondering why that's not broken down a wee bit more. That's it, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. In relation to transitions, absolutely vital piece of work. So Eunice McLennan, who is John's opposite in the Health and Social Care Partnership, has taken on the chair of the transitions group. Now, the last APC meeting, in discussion with John, I think we've got to a point where we need to refresh how we are approaching transitions. Now, it was discussed at a joint CPC-APC event in Edinburgh last week that I attended, and I think most areas were grappling with the best way forward to deal with those who find themselves in that group of people who are transitioning from child to adult care. It's a big challenge, particularly in relation to some who are involved in drug misuse and alcohol, and their lives sometimes can be quite chaotic. I think we've learned a lot of lessons from a previous SCR we did on 18 a couple of years ago, and I think our services are much better set up now for that transitioning phase. So whilst we've got work to do, Councillor, absolutely, and I know Eunice is keen to take this forward even further over the next few months and has already been, I think, again, without resting on laurels, I think I'm more reassured now than I was 2 years ago about how we deal with people in that sort of grouping. In relation to other, I will get the absolute specific breakdown for you, Councillor, right down to each number, and we will get that sent to you. And we'll put a bit of commentary beside it as well, if that's helpful.
Thanks very much, Ian. That would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you both. Councillor Gall, thank you.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for the report. It was it made some good reading. It was back to the table that Councillor Devine had just spoken about, and it was I was interested. Obviously, the family number and the members of the public referrals have gone up quite significantly percentage-wise, but friend and neighbours had reduced from 2021, but seemed very, very low. And I would have thought that those three groupings would have, had a bit of a correlation. Do you think, or do you have any idea of why you think friend or neighbour doesn't have as many referrals as possibly it could, or is there a specific reason?
I would think one of the reasons potentially is that because we're getting an increased number from the family now, that maybe friends and neighbours don't feel that they need to report in the knowledge that family are doing it. It may be that members of the public referrals include some people who might be friends or neighbours, but they've not disclosed that. That's not, I can't factually say that, but I would hazard a guess that that might be some of it. I also think sometimes particular neighbours perhaps might not want to become involved sometimes. Not that that information would probably be disclosed, but sometimes I think there may be a wee hesitancy there. But I'm reassured, Councillor, of the fact that we've got an increase in family reports and an increase in members of the public reports, which I hope are picking up on all of those that should be getting referred to us. I know that's probably not massively scientific, but that's my feeling for it.
Okay, Councillor Gall.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a difficult question to answer. It was just more of a query. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Speed.
Thanks, Convener. It was in relation to the referral process, and I just wondered how accessible the process is for those that are not online and don't have, access to digital means. Also wondered in terms of the single agency self-evaluation documents that have been distributed. I just wondered if you can confirm how many have been returned, and also if there's not any returns, do we know why that would be the case? And what actions have been identified by the single agencies following their self-evaluations?
Thank you, Councillor. In relation to the process, John might be able to come in here and just give a bit more, but it is a valid point about those who are not online and not have that digital option. If they are already engaged with services, then if they would had a particular issue or reason to self-refer or refer with somebody else, then I'm pretty sure that the workers who are currently engaged with that individual would support them in making that referral. John, do you want to come in there about just general terms on referrals?
Thanks, Ewan. Thank you, Councillor Speed. So, as you'll know, obviously we have Angus Independent Advocacy involved, and we do get indicative feedback through different means of individuals' experience of the adult protection process. However, in respect of that access to referral, I'm happy to take that away as an action and come back to you, and I'm wondering if that is something that we could pick up and have a meeting on Friday, that I would bring this to Councillor Speed, and I can come back to you separately within an email. It may well be that there's a small term piece of work we could look at with Angus Independent Advocacy around that, to do a consultation to make sure that we're looking at ensuring the process is as easy to access as it should be. I think because we've seen such a significant rise of referrals, in lots of ways, I think the referral data itself shows that it is hopefully easy to make referrals, that those processes are straightforward and accessible for folk, because we do continue to see that increase. But as you say, for those who perhaps don't have access to online resources, is that a potential barrier? Happy to take that forward as a piece of work and come back to you.
Okay, Lois.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd be really keen, because I'm concerned that there may be people who aren't online but also wish to remain anonymous as well, so they perhaps wouldn't want to go through another group or organisation and still want to be able to report as discreetly as possible.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dorn.
Thank you. Some of my questions have already been answered, but I just wanted to raise one about future planning. I note that the report mentions the fact that the database is currently being created in order for the stats from Angus to be compared with what's going on nationally, and obviously the challenge around whether or not numbers are going to stay the same or increase is another one that you're dealing with. So I just wondered how you are managing to balance that with future planning. I presume you're hoping that the database will give you more information for planning, but it must be quite tricky to plan for the future when it is known in terms of numbers.
That is a very valid point, Councillor, because yes, so I'd rather have data that's completely current, and that we can plan accordingly. Where we do get fairly current data, not immediately current, is from Police Scotland, and not just for adult protection, but also for violence against women and girls. We get a quarterly update, which gives us a bit of an idea as to what key trends and what the key issues are. And just through general conversation at meetings that we have, we can pick up on particular issues that may be coming forward from John's team, etc. So if there was a big spike in financial harm referrals, because of the process we've got in Angus, we would be picking that up fairly quickly. But it's right, because we're about to embark on updating the strategic plan for the next 3 years. And it would be particularly ideal to have the current data available to allow us to do that. However, that plan is flexible, and when the data does come through, if we need to tweak it or change it, then we'll have the flexibility to do that. So it's not guesswork for our planning going forward. I would absolutely say that's not the case. And also picking up issues from reviews, from network of support events, and other ongoing work, we can get a fairly strong feeling as to where our issues are. Particularly that is in relation to preventative work, because we want to channel our resources into the parts of that work that are really going to make a difference. So that's pretty vital for us going forward. You may be aware that we've the complete structure of public protection has just recently changed. And so under the new structure, I've actually established a data delivery group, which should help with us getting better and more comprehensive data to allow us to plan better for the future. And the Chief Executive, I see sitting here today, has asked that we have a data collection that's for some indicators that are particular to Angus, as opposed to just national indicators. So we've embarked on that piece of work, and that'll be a main feature of the data group going forward. Convener, I didn't answer Councillor Speed's second question that she had. Is it okay if I just go on and talk about that?
Yes, Ewan, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor, sorry, I didn't finish my answer to you. In relation to the single agency work that's been going on, so I'll use, since John's sitting there, I'll use Angus Health and Social Care Partnership as an example. Now, John and his team conduct various single agency audits, and where it relates to multi-agency work, that gets fed into the committee through the self-evaluation, continuous improvement delivery group, and then that is picking up on Councillor Doran's point. That's then fed into the planning going forward for the future. So there is a route for multi-agency learning coming through from those single agency audits, and that's how we consider it and plan and address that for the future. Where the audits relate to single agency matters, clearly that's a matter for the single agencies to address.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. Forgive me if I've missed something glaringly obvious here. Page 7 of your report for the figure 1 for the number of referrals by source for 22-23 was 840. And then on the next page for figure 2, the number of adults at risk, it states that there were 99. So I'm just curious, what happened to the other 741 referrals? Is that because they were deemed to not be at risk, or is it because they're still going through the process, or they've been perhaps referred or signposted to other agencies and services to support them more appropriately? Thank you.
That's entirely correct, Councillor. Those 840 referrals are just the overall number. And then when they're further screened, reviewed and investigated, the figure of 99 adults at risk is the actual number of those referrals who've moved on to the next part of the process, if you like, who are subject to inquiry and investigation. So in relation to the others, yes, they may have been signposted elsewhere. Early intervention may have resulted in the issue being addressed before they've had to move on to a more intrusive investigative process, and that's really what we would want to do. So when referrals come in, we would like to get an earlier issue, and that's where most of them are screened out. But John might want just to add a wee bit more to that.
Thank you, Ewan. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gregg. Ewan's absolutely right that there's a number of individuals that will be signposted to other organisations. The legislation exists, in essence, to find the least restrictive way of supporting and ensuring that someone remains safe. So we have had examples of some excellent preventative and proactive care, which you wouldn't often associate with adult protection. We tend to think of it as a very formal measure that results in a case conference and plans. That's not always the case, and in fact the Care Inspectorate are interested in unpicking this a bit more, and I suspect over time we'll see that through forthcoming inspections they'll be interested to see what are we doing in Angus that is preventative in nature, and we're actually probably a little bit ahead of the curve with some of the work that we're going on, and we are trying to report that through the data set, not only nationally but also through our local data sets. And as Ewan said, we will have access to greater data in the new structure, and the hope would be that we can capture perhaps some more of that early intervention work and showcase that in future reports.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? No comments? No comment. Oh, Councillor Speed.
Yeah, thanks, convener. This is obviously a really important piece of work and work that goes on day in, day out in terms of protecting the people of Angus. However, when I was looking through the report, I couldn't help but notice that there's at least 13 subgroups involved in the adult protection work. And I guess I'm probably just thinking out loud, so it probably is a question that can be picked up offline. But I guess I'm just in my head wondering, the amount of hours, the amount of staff that goes in, that's involved in being in those subgroups, and how does that compare with the multi-agency meetings with service users in terms of time and the distribution of resources? Thank you.
Convener, I'm happy to just give a pretty quick response to that, if that's okay.
Yes, we were actually at comments, but yes, okay.
Sorry, convener. It was a comment, but I guess it was just, I was speaking out loud, just thoughts around the amount of subgroups that we have, and just wondering how this compares to the amount of hours spent with service users on the front line.
Okay, Ewan, if you want to go ahead. Yeah,
no, absolutely fair point. So under our new structure going forward, Councillor, those subgroups were often duplicated across child protection and violence against women as well, and therefore we had an inordinate number of meetings, subgroup meetings, often covering some of the same points. So in the new arrangements going forward, that's been reduced to 5 delivery groups, subgroups in total, and these will be prevention, policy, data, self-evaluation and learning and development. So it's to reduce the number of meetings and commitments that officers have in dealing with the issues that need to be addressed, and to free up time for practitioners to have more engagement with those who need to be supported.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Thanks, that answers my comment.
Any further comment? No. Well, there are 2 recommendations for us. The other 2 are for the Family Education and Justice Committee on the 30th of May. Our ones are at 3.1, 1 and 2. Do we agree this report? Thank you very much, and thank you to Ewan and John for your very detailed presentation and the answering of the questions. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, members, the next item is the agenda item number 6, Treasury Management Strategy Statement 2024-25, and it's a report by the Director of Finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon, members of the committee. This report has already been to Council. It needs the investment strategy and the Treasury strategy needs to be signed off by full Council, but it does come here for further review and scrutiny. So that's what the purpose of the report on the agenda is today. Now, I know from looking back at the training records that pretty much every member of this committee has had the benefit of Treasury training, so I won't go into all the detail and the background, but because it is one of the more technical and specialist areas of the council's work and the finance activity. In a nutshell, the Treasury work that we do and what's covered by this strategy is really about managing cash flows, so we're able to pay what we need to, staff and suppliers and all of that sort of stuff. Borrowing funds that we need to undertake various capital projects, generating income from our investment of our surplus cash balances, and of course managing the risk associated with all of those activities. The strategy, as I said at full council when it was considered there, is very similar to what we've done in past years. We're continuing to, in a sense, defer new borrowing, although we do have new borrowing to do. We're deferring that new borrowing for the time being until interest rates fall. Obviously, a fair bit of guesswork in terms of when that will happen, but we expect that to happen towards the end of this financial year and into the following financial year. So, trying to get that new borrowing at the lowest interest rates we can. The borrowing strategy, that's set out on page 45, table 1. That shows the council's current debt position and the projected future borrowing requirements. The expectation, table 2 on page 46, sets out what the future projections are for interest rates. Those change, those are updated fairly regularly. But that was the latest estimates that we're basing our borrowing and investment strategies on. Ultimately, pages 46 and 47, section 5, what we're saying in relation to new borrowing is we're going to be flexible. We will borrow possibly at different periods, potentially between fixed and variable rates, to try and get the maximum advantage. So we'll continue to do what we've always done and react to the circumstances and the market position. A big part of the strategy that's in the report today, Convener, covers the investment strategy and policy, and there's a lot of work goes into that on a daily basis in terms of managing our cash flows and our investments. And there's quite a bit of coverage in the report about the sort of things we can invest in, the creditworthiness criteria that we apply, etc., etc., etc. Probably the only thing I would want to flag in relation to that is we are targeting a return on the investment of our surplus cash for next year of 4.5%. That's a little bit less than this year, but that's on the basis that we expect interest rates to fall. But we think that 4.5%, if we hit that target, that will yield income of about 2.6 million, which is a significant sum in terms of the council's budget. Happens to be about equivalent to a 4.5% increase in council tax. So, it's a significant help to our financial position. But that's probably all I wanted to say by way of introduction, Convener. I'm happy to open it out to questions.
Thank you, members. As Mr Lorimer has already intimated, this report was considered by the Council on the 21st of March, so I'm not sure if there will be any further questions. No. Any comments then? No, because that was also done at the Council. Okay, there are two recommendations for us, 3.2, 1 and 2. Do we agree this report? Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item number 7 is the External Audit Annual Audit Plan, and it's a report by the Director of Finance. Mr Lorimer, thank you.
Thanks again, Convener. Yes, this report presents the annual audit plan from colleagues in Audit Scotland, who are our external auditors. Probably better that Pauline Gillen, who's our Audit Director, she's going to speak to this one. I can see her online, and that's good news. I'll pass over to Pauline.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Yes, as Mr Lorimer has highlighted, the paper coming to you this afternoon is our annual audit plan for the 23-24 audit of Angus Council. I'll take the paper as read and won't go into too much detail, but if I may, just a couple of things I'd like to bring to your attention. The introduction of the paper at paragraph 1, the bullet points there outline the various pieces of work that encompass the annual audit that myself and the team will carry out this year. A couple of those are similar with pieces of work that members will have seen in previous annual audit plans, so there's not too much different in this year's plan. Just a couple of things to highlight. Exhibit 1 of the plan, we outline the materiality levels that we employ for carrying out our audit work. You'll see there that we have an overall planning materiality level that we set at 2% of gross expenditure. This indicative figure here of £11.2 million is based on last year's audited financial statements. When we receive at the end of June, start of July, the unaudited accounts for 23-24, we will revise that figure, but it will remain at 2% of gross expenditure. Below that, we outline performance materiality, which is essentially what the audit team use as a trigger threshold. So if in the course of our audit work, we identify errors or misstatements, that £6.7 million would be the point at which we would, if we exceed that level, we would take a step back and consider whether we need to carry out additional audit work just to address that risk of material misstatement to the accounts. And then finally, below that, £300,000 is our reporting threshold. So that's the level at which I would be required to report back to this committee as those charged with governance any errors or misstatements in the financial statements. Moving on to Exhibit 2, we outline there the significant risks of material misstatement to the accounts as identified as part of our annual planning and risk assessment work. Members will see there that we only have one significant risk, and that is the risk of material misstatement due to fraud caused by management override of controls. This is a standard risk that members will have seen in all previous annual audit plans, and it's a risk that we are required to address as part of the auditing standards. It simply recognises the unique position that management are in to override financial controls. In the final column there, under planned audit response, you'll see that we have a number of audit procedures that we'll carry out as part of this year's audit so that we can address that significant risk, and we will report back on the findings as part of the annual audit report at the end of this year's audit process. The ISAs also require us to consider any risk of material misstatement due to fraud in relation to income and expenditure. Paragraphs 18 and 19 outline the reasons why we have considered there to be no significant risk of material misstatement in relation to those income and expenditure streams. What this essentially means is we will carry out our standard audit procedures as we would do every year, and we're not required to do anything additional as we haven't identified any significant risk in those areas. Paragraph 21 and 22, these are other areas of audit focus. So these are areas where we've identified a risk, albeit not a significant risk to the financial statements. Again, you'll have seen this in previous annual audit plans, and it's in relation to the estimations and judgment involved in the valuation of land and buildings and the pension liability due to the significant nature of expert judgment and estimation in both those areas. And we will rely on the work of management's experts in both those areas. So that will be your property valuer and the actuary. So moving on to the next section of the report, wider scope and best value. So that's at page 10 of the report. Members will be aware that the scope of public sector audit is wider than just an audit of the financial statements. We're also required to consider the 4 wider scope areas that are bullet pointed there at paragraph 33. And again, we will carry out work throughout the year and report on all of these areas as part of our annual audit report at the end of the year. You will also be aware that last year represented the first year in a change to the approach to best value, whereby the Accounts Commission determine a theme for each year, and local auditors are required to carry out a thematic review and report to the Accounts Commission and the Controller of Audit. So for this year, 23-24, the thematic review is on workforce innovation, and the team have already kicked off some of that work and already had some internal meetings with regard to that. Again, we'll report back to this committee on our findings, and we'll also summarise the findings from that work in our annual audit report at the end of the year. So finally, we have reporting arrangements and the timetable. We are aiming, in discussion with management, aiming to sign off the audit this year by the 30th of September, so reverting back to the statutory deadlines pre-COVID. And at Exhibit 5, we've got a detailed annual accounts timetable that we prepared in discussion with management to ensure that we meet that timetable. You'll see we've got a couple of TBCs in both those exhibits, and that's just for us to determine specific Scrutiny and Audit Committee dates, but just to reassure committee that we are aiming for a sign-off by the 30th of September. That was all I'd planned to say on the report, but I'm happy to take any comments or questions from members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Any questions? Councillor Bell.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Always good to read these forward-looking plans. Just wondered how, in a strategic context, Audit Scotland is addressing progress on the climate change mitigations that we all need to make, and how that comes into the auditing process. Thanks.
Thank you. You might recall that in last year's audit, the Auditor General for Scotland and the Accounts Commission required all local audit teams to consider two specific areas of interest. One of those was with relation to cybersecurity, and the other one was with regard to net zero. So last year's annual audit report, we reported some findings in relation to that. This year, we're not being asked to do any additional work on that, but we will consider the council's arrangements and governance and actions towards achieving any specific targets in terms of reporting performance as part of our overall work this year. So there isn't anything specific on climate change that we'll be doing, but the team will be considering it as part of overall performance.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Gall.
Thanks, Convener, and apologies, this is maybe a bit of a stupid question. It was just on page 80 of the papers or 10 of the report and the wider scope of and best value. And, you know, given Andy's Council has already saved nearly £100 million over the last 12 years, and we just had a budget where we only balanced it by using reserves, and we don't know what curveballs are coming ahead, how realistic is it to ask if the body is planning effectively, because there are so many uncertainties and variables, and we're already unsustainable in the way that we're financing ourselves. So I just wondered how that's possible. You know, how is that a fair thing to try and ask?
Yeah, yes, certainly, and you'll appreciate that all local authorities, in fact, all public bodies, are operating with the same financial restraints. So you highlighted there the important factor is about the assumptions and the different scenarios that council have to consider in the future. So essentially the work that we'll carry out in financial sustainability is us looking at what plans are in place and to what extent management are considering different things that may happen in the medium to long term. So recognising the significantly challenging financial times and also the significant uncertainty going into the future, and ensuring that sufficient cognizance has been taken of that, where we're not asking for everything to be a penny put in every saving and the plans to go too far in the future. So we're setting it in that context, recognising the difficulties, but to get some assurance that management and council are aware of that and have got plans in place. And there's also a note in a paper later on talking about the financial situation where lots of councils are having to rely on reserves. So there'll be a really big focus on where savings are recurring savings, just rather than relying on those in-year non-recurring savings. And that's certainly a common message across the sector.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. With regard to the audit fee, which is on page 83 of the report, so part 45, it says in determining the audit fee, we have taken into account the risk exposure of the council. For other council reports that we've read, from our financial point of view, the council is sitting at a very high score for finance, sitting in the red. So with the increase, but looking forward to next year, we're probably still going to be in quite a risky position financially. So does that mean that the higher the risk level of the council, the more that our audit fee is? So therefore, if we're able to reduce the risk, then the cost of the audit fee reduces? Or is that too simplistic?
Yes. So when we talk about risk, we talk about the audit risk rather than the risk of the council in terms of their finances. So we think about your governance arrangements, we think about your internal controls, and that drives what we consider to be a risk for the council. So you'll see in the report Exhibit 2 when we outline the significant risk of material misstatement. So for us, that's what we consider to be the council's risk rather than your overall financial risk. And you'll see we only have one standard risk in there, which puts the council in a good position. So the fee level that is in the plan is the baseline fee. So if we were, for example, to find significant issues with your internal control framework or your governance arrangements, and significant errors in the financial statements, then that would increase the risk for the audit, and that would require us to charge an additional fee. So this fee is based on a good, well-run council with good governance arrangements and good internal controls. So it's not about your financial risk externally, it's more about your internal risk to the audit. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you. Any other questions? No comments? Okay, we have two recommendations, 2.1a and b. Is this report agreed? Thank you very much. And thank you, Pauline and Mark, for your attendance today. Members, agenda item number 8 is the Local Government in Scotland Financial Bulletin 2022-23, and it's a report by the Director of Finance. Thank you.
Thanks again, Convener. Yeah, this report is on the agenda today, largely for information, but also for scrutiny. It covers all councils, not just Angus specifically, although Angus is mentioned in a couple of parts of the full report. I've not put the full report with the papers. There's a link to the full report. The covering report really just summarises the key points, the key messages as it's referred to in the report. Probably no surprises in the report commentary, about financial pressures on councils. We've just been talking about it there in relation to the last item. That's well known and well understood. Key message 6 within the report, it was a standout one for me. It talks about, perhaps makes clear the seriousness of the position. It's effectively saying no council is unsustainable at the moment, but there are significant risks, and again that's something the committee is well aware of. The bulletin makes 6 recommendations, and what we've done in relation to that is had a look at our level of compliance or how well we measure up against those in terms of our approach to self-evaluation. And from that, there's in the appendix to the report, you'll see there's 4 actions that have been identified for improvement. 3 of those are really quite minor things, which we will reflect in our management commentary in the 23-24 accounts, and another action in relation to consultation around budget decisions, etc., etc. So it's a helpful report, I think, just kind of given an outline of the position in local government finance nationally based on the information from accounts for 22-23 financial year. And we've used it as a learning exercise to self-evaluate where we are relative to the good practice. And actually we measure up pretty well to that, and just a couple of wee minor improvements that need to be made in the main. Again, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lorimer. Any questions? Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. Mr. Lorimer, page 89 of the report, under the key messages, in the second paragraph it says, however, an increasing proportion of ring-fenced or provided with the expectation that money is spent in specific services. Is that effectively another way of saying that we're trying to operate with one hand tied behind our back, and because we've got ring-fenced money we can only spend in specific areas and specific places, whereas a local authority we would much rather have the flexibility to be able to spend it in areas that perhaps more fit our needs better, compared as this kind of like a one-size-fits-all from the Scottish Government that each local authority, but because we're all different, we've all got different needs and different wants in different areas where we need to spend more money in one thing than another local authority might do with others. Because it also mentions the Verity House Agreement and trying to move away from that ring fencing. So effectively I'll be trying to run with one hand tied behind her back.
I wouldn't use those words, Councillor Gregg, but I think what the key message is saying is that the more that there is ring fencing, the less flexibility that councils have to address their financial challenges. There's two ways of looking at ring fencing. From the government's point of view, it ensures that money is spent on the priorities they want to see the money spent on. From a local point of view, it takes away a degree of control and flexibility for local councillors to make the decisions about how our resources are deployed locally. You're right to point out the Verity House Agreement, and it was the case in terms of the 24-25 budget and grant settlement that a significant amount of funding was moved from ring-fenced as specific grant into what's called the baseline grant. There is still some ring fencing, but a significant amount of funding has now moved into the baseline grant. And that discussion and debate around the level of ring fencing and its appropriateness is still ongoing and is obviously a key part of the Verity House Agreement. I think it's highlighted in this report because it does remove flexibility for local councils. But as I say, there are different views as to the pros and cons of ring fencing. COSLA's position is very clear on behalf of all councils that they think ring fencing should be reduced and removed. You know, that's the position kind of nationally from a local government point of view.
Thank you. Councillor Louise Nicholl.
To be honest, my question was going to be around the Verity House Agreement and ring fencing and how easy that was to manoeuvre around that. And but I think you've pretty much answered a lot of my question, your response to Councillor Gregg.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. I was just wondering, how is the developing of the plan for consultation coming on? Is that prior to the budget? I mean, we did say at some point, can't remember when, that we really need to start that quite early this year because we've not managed before particularly well.
Through you, Convener. Yeah, it's a really challenging one, Councillor Devine, really just in terms of resources and the scale of the financial challenge that we face. It leaves very little room for manoeuvre. So in terms of our change programme and all of the savings options that have been identified, apart from a few things that haven't been taken forward, most of them have. But we're acutely aware of the need to do more in that area. There are a couple of things that are other pieces of work that are would fit well with that in terms of our approach to place planning. So rather than consulting only on the budget, it would be better to consult on a more holistic basis across our priorities and our use of resources. We haven't done any major amount of work on addressing that particular recommendation yet, but it is very much on the list of to-dos, and we need to make progress on that really before the end of the summer so that we can go out and consult in the autumn.
I know there's not a great deal of wriggle room in it.
Thank you. Councillor Speed.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, a couple of questions. My first one there was actually on what are we doing in terms of public consultation, which Mr. Lorimer has answered, and I was looking for a commitment to ensure that we do undertake this work, because I think having the public's views and their input into the council's finances is so key, and even more so going forward as we continue to face such huge challenges. However, my other question was really in relation to the finance paper by Audit Scotland, where it suggests that we need clear and more public-facing use of performance against financial resilience indicators and measures. And I think partly been discussed already, but just was wondering how this work is progressing and where we can see the indicators locally. I'm just not too clear on that.
Thanks, Councillor Speed. Yeah, in terms of the first point around a commitment to that consultation, that is absolutely our intention. As I said in my response to Councillor Devine, the challenge is really resourcing that work. It is a significant piece of work alongside all of the other challenges we have. particularly with some of the challenges we have with filling vacancies, etc. at the moment as well. But that is the intention of it. It's good practice, and it's something that we do recognise that we need to do, even if there isn't a lot of wriggle room within the numbers. In terms of the financial resilience, we do already do a fair amount of reporting within the management commentary in relation to that. That's within the accounts document. So there is some reporting on that. There's also indicators within the local government benchmarking framework, and there'll be a report on that coming to the next meeting of this committee, covering some aspects of financial resilience. And we did a comprehensive review of the Council's financial resilience last, I think it was September, did it come to Council, looking at our position across a number of different things. So that is something that we already have some indicators on, albeit they are in the accounts, in a rather large document, so easy to have missed them. I hope that gives you some reassurance, Councillor Speed, that it's something that is very much on my radar, obviously, and given my role.
Yeah, Convener.
Yes, Councillor Speed?
Yeah, thanks to Mr Larmour for his response, and it would be good as well to have an assurance that there will be a commitment to engage with the public, albeit mindful of the stretch on resources, but not just online, not to just have online engagement, but to be out within the community of Angus as well, as much as possible.
Yeah, just come back on that Convener. Yeah, and I think part of that, very much hear that Councillor Speed, and part of what we need to do, as well as consulting perhaps on specific options, is we need to help the public better understand, I would say, how councils are funded and why some of the pressures are there, and some of the decisions that are having to be made, why those are having to be made. Local government finance is complex, so it's not it's not easy to explain, but I think we do need to keep trying to do that with the public, because it's the public that's impacted by the decisions that we have to make.
Yeah, and some of those conversations that you can have in person, I think there's much more depth and meaning to them than they are kind of online or on a post that goes out. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Thanks, Convener. Just reading from page 89 of the report, local appointed auditors did not identify any councils in Scotland as being financially unsustainable in the short term. Obviously, going back months in the press, some English councils have had real difficulty, facing bankruptcy and having to raise council tax up higher. So my question would be, what is the big differences that you note between councils are doing and English councils are doing that there seems to be a wide gap? Because when I read that in the report, I was wondering what the picture was Scotland-wide, if there are any councils that were close to a difficult position, and that statement I just read was a little bit reassuring for the short term. And I just wondered if you could give me a little bit of more on some of the differences that have led to that variance between Scotland and England. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Shepherd, again through you, Convener. I'm probably not qualified or knowledgeable enough to say too much about the situation and the differences between Scotland and England. I do know that some of those councils in England that have got into financial difficulties and issued what's called a Section 114 notice, there's been a variety of reasons for that. Some of that has been about demand pressures, particularly around adult and children's social care. The level of demand is simply so great that it's outstripping the resources. Some other councils have got themselves into financial difficulty by making investment decisions that have proven not to be, they've just landed them in difficulty, perhaps overstretched, and the market changed and all of that sort of stuff. So a whole variety of reasons. In terms of the Scottish position, I think it would be fair to say that all councils are under significant financial pressure. I mean, that's really not news. That has been the case for quite a while now. I, like you, had picked up on that key point 6 about no councils being financially unsustainable in the short term. However, the financial outlook is extremely challenging. And that's pretty stark language, I think. I think it would be fair to say that some councils are probably closer to the problem, the cliff edge, if you want to, come up with a phrase, than others. But my equivalence across every council, those are the issues that we're wrestling with. Developments like the Verity House Agreement, developments like the fiscal framework that will come as part of the Verity House Agreement will hopefully be part of the solution. But you've heard me say in this chamber before about the system of local government funding is not working. It does need reform. That reform can probably take a number of different shapes. If that reform doesn't happen fast enough, then I think we potentially will see the difficulties that have been evident in England. But it's quite a diverse sort of situation across the two countries and from council to council.
Thank you. Councillor Louise Nicholl.
Thank you, Convener. On page 90, the tax freeze is mentioned and how it reduces our flexibility financially, and that the financial sustainability of this is not yet known. I was just wondering, when will you have a better understanding of the impact, and when would we be provided with this information?
Thanks, Councillor Nicholl. Yeah, so that's a comment from the Accounts Commission in terms of their kind of national overview of that. And I think at the time that was written, it was the tax freeze hadn't. This report was published in January, so not every council had made their decision on the tax freeze at that point. Every council has set its budget now for 24-25, and every council has now decided to go with the freeze. So that's a decision every council's made, weighing up the kind of pros and cons of applying that. The funding for that has been confirmed as being baseline, which means it will be there into future years to help with that. The issues still remain in terms of the sustainability of local government and local government funding as a whole, and obviously council tax decisions are just one part of that.
Thank you. Any further questions? None online. Comments? No, we have 3 recommendations and they're all for noting. Is this report agreed? Thank you very much, members. Agenda item number 9, I will take the short title, the RIPSA quarterly report, and I think Mrs Watson's going to talk on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, members. This should hopefully be a quick report, given that we have had no requests for permission to use surveillance powers under RIPSA in the first 3 months. This is the standard report we put up as per the best practice guidance. In case you wonder why you're being told no authorisations have been made, but we're simply asking members to note that that's the position. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I take it there will be no questions or comments on this one? No. Okay. Is this report agreed? Thank you very much. Agenda item number 10 is the detailed risk reporting to Scrutiny and Audit Committee, and it's a report by the Service Leader Internal Audit. Good afternoon, Mrs Wiley.
Good afternoon, Convener. This time round, the risk that we're going to be talking about is the climate change one, and I believe there is someone here from the service to discuss this for you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr McGuinness. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Cathy. Good afternoon, members of the committee. This report presents the detailed risk information to Scrutiny and Audit Committee on the Corporate Climate Change Risk Register. Since the last report to committee on the 25th of April 2023, a significant range of activity has been undertaken, not least the reporting on the progress of the Net Zero Action Plan, but also on the rollout of the climate change literacy training to members and officers and the development of the local heat and energy efficiency strategy. Although the climate change risk remit sits within planning and sustainable development, the collaboration to deliver net zero and climate change is very much a council-wide collaborative process, as you will all no doubt know. As it was reported last year, the climate change team has 2 officers, one full-time and one temporary, of which the temporary role comes to an end at the end of this year. However, the benefit of having 2 climate change officers dedicated within the service has resulted in a lot of the achievements and progress we have made towards the Council's goals with regard to climate change and net zero this year. Although there has been a lot of excellent work done over the year, I just want to focus on a couple of areas in the report, as I thought this would be useful to give members an overview on this work. In relation to the Sustainable Energy and Climate Action Plan, members will be aware that a progress report was brought to Council in November 2023. The report noted that the first CCAP steering meeting took place on the 5th of September, and 26 attendees were present at the initial meeting, including representation from the 18 key partners in that report. Members should also note that the CCAP steering group will produce a further delivery programme agreed by its members, of which progress in that delivery programme will be reported to Council as part of the next CCAP progress report in 2024. Also, members are probably aware that the CCAP steering group now has a chair, which is Roy Nelson of the James Hutton Institute, and he's agreed to take on that role going forward. Moving on, annual public bodies duty report, data gathering for 2023-24 period is well underway, and again this report will be submitted to Council in November 2024. In terms of carbon insetting potential within the risk register, guidance for Scottish Government unfortunately is still not available, and as a result this continues to have an impact under that risk register action. However, significant progress has been made on the preparation of the local heat and energy efficiency strategy and delivery plan, which has been written in-house with support by our consultants. The strategy and delivery plan is scheduled to go out for a legislative period of public consultation before the summer period, and a member seminar will be held in advance of that public consultation to go over the documents and take on board any final comments members may have before undertaking the consultation period. The strategy and delivery plan will then come before Council for approval later this year, and the delivery plan is proposed to be updated every 2 years in line with the frequency required for the delivery programme of the local development plan. There is approximately still £25,000 left of the first tranche of money from COSLA and the Scottish Government. However, members will be no doubt glad to hear that COSLA and Scottish Government have announced that a further of £75,000 per year till the financial year 2027-28 has finished will be made available to help deliver the local heat and energy efficiency strategy and delivery programme, and this is a much welcome contribution by COSLA and the Scottish Government to help us undertake that process. In terms of mandatory e-learning for staff on climate change, this will start to be rolled out in April 2024, which is this month, and will be completed before the end of the year. This will be communicated to staff in due course. However, as members will no doubt realise, we'll have to take stock of the Scottish Government's decision to replace the 2030 targets and await what further measures and other targets are to put in place, and therefore we'll have to update the training accordingly once that information is communicated to us. We also have embedded climate change impacts into all council activities and decisions, not less by including an environmental implications section with all community report templates, as members have no doubt seen as they came into this here. This was an outcome of the Sustainable Scotland Network and Climate Change Impacts Assessment Working Group, and I hope it proves beneficial going forward to track our progress and embed these climate change impacts in all the work that we do. Finally, I thought it was fitting to end on the early success of our land use adaptation programme. It was a significant achievement obtaining more than £1.4 million of funding for the environmental project aimed at transforming the biodiversity, climate resilience and ecology of the River South Esk and its catchment from the Scottish Government's Nature Restoration Fund, and I hope members think that was a good decision that we got there going forward to deliver this project. Therefore, to conclude, good progress has been made in a number of areas, but staff resource and funding is required to maintain and accelerate progress towards addressing the climate emergency and crisis and our net zero targets and ambitions. I'm happy to answer any questions or queries that members may have on the above and the report itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. Page 97 of the combined papers for the risk title for climate change, under existing controls for Angus Shoreline Management Plan, with the potential impact of large-scale assessment of the risks associated with erosion and flooding of the coast. I've previously mentioned several times at full council meetings and other committee meetings my concerns around the erosion of the dunes at Montrose. Subsequent storms that we've had since those has eroded those further. And quite comically, from a member of the public pointed out that Angus Council, we used to have a little stand where you could place your phone and take a picture of the dunes, come back a year later, take another picture and see the distance of that erosion. That it's eroded that much, we've lost that signpost and that pole into the sea as well, which goes to show just how much that coast is eroding. Just, I think it was last week, we had a weather warning that was issued with potential flooding due to a high tide in Montrose. And it seems to be that the pace that, with regards to Montrose and the dunes, is moving quite glacial. And I've previously said at Council that if we don't fix these things soon, then it's not just we're going to lose the golf course in Montrose, we're effectively going to lose Montrose. So because on page 97 this is still sitting in a red in the RAG score, it doesn't have the number associated with it, but what additional work is being done and at what pace, specifically around our coastal towns, Montrose specifically, Arbroath I know has some issues as well going on. Climate change is very much at the forefront of everyone's minds at the moment, especially after the effects of Storm Babette, the weather warnings that we get, the flood warnings for Montrose and Arbroath. What more is being done and at what speed to try and assure the public that we're on top of this and also the residents in those affected towns?
Through you, Convener. Thanks for your question, Councillor Gregg. It's really difficult to answer that question without knowing full sort of details of the rest of the sort of councils doing, but I do know it's been looked at specifically in Montrose, and our works with our roads colleagues are ongoing. With these things, as you're no doubt aware, the resources and staff are stretched as it is, but we are endeavouring to deal with these problems as fast as we can, Councillor, and the unprecedented weather that we've had this year in Brechin and also throughout the rest of Angus is accelerating the need to deal with these things. So I don't have a direct response to you, but what I will try and endeavour to do, Councillor Gregg, is follow that up with an email and copy to the rest of the members of the committee, just to give you an update on where everything is, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr McGuinness. Mr Armstrong.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Really just to add to what Anthony was saying, that Graham Daly represents the council and works very closely with the Scottish Government and Montrose Port and other interested parties in Montrose in relation to determining and then putting in place a robust coastal protection plan. So as Anthony said, we'll get Graham to give a detailed update to the committee on where that work is at and what the next stages are.
Thank you very much, Mr Armstrong. Anyone else? Any other questions? Nothing online. Comments? No. We have one recommendation then. Oh, sorry, Councillor Dorn.
Thanks. I was just going to comment on the work towards the climate change targets are incredibly important and they are really, really challenging. And I would hope to see Angus Council sticking to those, even though they are difficult, rather than changing the progress towards them. So I just wanted to make that comment on that report. So thanks for summarising everything.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? One recommendation then. Is the report agreed? Thank you very much. Members' report. Sorry, agenda item number 11, reports relevant to the work of the Scrutiny and Audit Committee. And again, it's Mrs Wiley. Thank you.
Thank you. This report summarises information from a number of reports that have gone either to the Council or other committees in the Council, or indeed to some of the boards and committee meetings of some of our partner organisations. And it's there just for your information and also to give the opportunity, if there was anything around any of that that you wanted more information on, to be able to ask for that at this stage.
Thank you very much, Mrs Wiley. Anything, members? I think it's very detailed anyway. Yes. Councillor Gregg, thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Specifically on page 105 of the report, So specifically the reports from Family Education and Justice about the Angus School Inspections report. There was some publication in the local press recently about that. Yet it was good to have an email from an officer giving a bit of additional context to that. But I think going forward, I think more needs to be looked at within that specific area, and also for with regards to the strategic housing investment plan from communities. Housing is continue to be a major issue within the council. I know I get my fair share of housing inquiries from residents. I think that additionally needs to be looked at. I think if anyone else would agree. Thank you.
Mrs. Wiley, did you hear that okay?
I did. Oh, am I still echoing? No, that's fine. So yeah, in terms of the school inspections, I don't know that I'm able to comment any further on those. We do have some pieces of work in the plan that will be coming up in one of the next items around housing. And again, I think that might be something that someone else that's in the meeting might be better placed to comment on.
Councillor Speed, I'll let Mr. Armstrong come in because I think this is relevant to Councillor Gregg's question, if that's okay. Mr. Armstrong, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Convener. And yes, it is. So in relation to Councillor Gregg's question about those two items, so there will be specific reports to I think it's actually the next Family Education and Justice Committee in relation to a number of inspections that have taken place. And members may be aware that we have a new practice now whereby there will be specific input to that committee in relation to inspections, whether it's to do with schools or children, families and justice establishments. And then in relation to the strategic housing investment plan, it's the intention of officers to bring forward to probably the Communities Committee a very specific report on the housing improvement plan and the range of interventions and improvements that are planned and will be implemented to address the concerns that members have been highlighting.
Thank you very much, Speed.
Yeah, mine was in relation to housing as well, but Mr. Armstrong, I think, has answered that. But just a point of clarity, if that information report that will be coming, will that also include the findings on our position with voids and void management?
Mr. Armstrong, can you answer that? Yeah, there you go.
Yes, although I think within the audit plan, and Ms. Wiley will know better than me, I think there is a specific piece of work to be done in relation to voids, but it will also be referenced in the improvement plan.
Okay, thank you. And my other couple of queries were in relation to the audits that kind of had been delayed, particularly the external placements for children, and if there's an update on that and when that will begin to progress. And also, I just wondered as well if the Tay Cities deal is something that perhaps could be added for audit as well, just given kind of the huge project that is and the expected benefits for Angus economy.
Mrs. Wiley, can you come back to Councillor Speed on that one? Thank you.
Sorry, yes. So in terms of the external placements for children, I should have a date, but I don't have it to hand in terms of when that audit will start. I know that there was work going on in the service there, and we were going to do the work once that was finished, but I'll need to come back to you around that after the meeting, Councillor Speed, sorry. In terms of Tay Cities, there is information in one of the reports that we're coming to, but I'll just talk about that just now. We did previously have a piece of work in the plan around the Tay Cities deal, but that was taken out again because the way that the Tay Cities deal is written, it's the accountable body that has responsibility for organising the audit of this, and therefore that lies with Dundee City Council. And there is I think in this report that we're just talking about just now, there is a mention of an information report that was made available from the last report that was done by the Dundee City Council Internal Audit Service around Tay Cities. I can confirm that Tay Cities deal is again in the plan for the 2024-25 Dundee City Council internal audit plan, which will be coming up to their committee tomorrow. But that's why we don't have it in the Angus plan.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions? Oh no. Comments? Councillor Bell, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Cathy. Just a couple of wee comments on page 109 around the left-hand column where it says IGB Audit Committee. The links actually take us to the IGB papers rather than the Audit Committee papers, but I would particularly draw to the committee's attention the Director of Public Health annual report from October 25 last year. And if you haven't read that, I would encourage you to do so. It shows the stark reality of the impact of poverty, particularly in Dundee. And relatively speaking, Angus and Perth and Kinross fare considerably better, but with pockets of significant concern. But that document drives the focus of our work in health and social care. And I would hope that all members have the opportunity to read that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Anyone else for comments? No. 2 recommendations then. Is this report agreed? Thank you very much. Agenda item number 12 is the Annual Internal Audit Plan 2024-25. And again, it's Mrs Wiley. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. And can I just apologise for that link being wrong in that last report? I'll try and make sure that doesn't happen again. This next report is the plan for 24-25. The way that the plan's put together has not changed from what's been done previously. We talk to a number of people within the council. We look at the risk registers. We think about the whole environment that the council is operating in, and it's very much a risk-based plan in terms of where we concentrate the work that we're going to do. We did have a number of items that were taken out of the plan in January 2024, which we said we would bring back into this plan, and we have done that with the exception of 2 pieces of work. One of them, ironically enough, was the Tay Cities deal piece of work, which we've just discussed, and the reason for that is because of the accountable body's responsibility for that. And the other piece that we didn't bring forward was also a piece around collaboration and partnership, because there had been some work done around that by external audit recently, and we didn't feel that in terms of risk there was much that we would add to that, and that the time that we have would be better spent elsewhere. We've got a little bit more information in this report about the assurance framework, just to kind of put the plan into perspective in terms of where we sit as part of that assurance framework and the types of information that we're contributing to and that we're auditing to give assurance around the framework, but also in terms of some of the other assurance that's around that we also take assurance from, if you like, so that we're not duplicating work that other organisations are also, inspection agencies are also undertaking. So I don't really have anything in particular that I want to emphasise in terms of the items that are in the plan, but I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you very much, Mrs Wiley. Any questions? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. I'd like to come back to the Tay Cities deal, actually. Clearly, the audit report will go to the body that deals with Tay Cities deal, but as partners in that, will we, Angus Council, see that at all?
Yes. The report does come once it's been agreed with the Tay board. It goes to the committee in Dundee, but it also is available in Angus. Now, in the past, we haven't brought that report to the Scrutiny and Audit Committee. It's been taken to the Service Committee. And this year it was made available as an information report, which may mean that not everyone has picked up on that. But we could, if you think it would be better in future, we could bring that once it's been published. We could bring it to the Scrutiny and Audit Committee.
I think that might be helpful.
Yeah, I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. That would be quite helpful, Cathy, because as Councillor Devine said, you know, we're involved with the Taste Cities deal too on the board, so that would be very useful. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Shepherd, thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Just on page 124 of the report in the table, I just noticed against Angus Live, it had audit days 50 and counter fraud days there was none. I was just wondering, like an organisation like Angus Live, there might be opportunities for fraud, and I just wondered why there was no days against that. Thanks.
We do from time to time actually spend some counter fraud days in Angus Alive, but we haven't up to now actually budgeted for those within the counter fraud time. But I take your point. That's maybe something that we should be thinking about going forward, and I'll take that on board for next year.
Thank you very much, Cathy.
Thank you.
Councillor Speed.
Yep, thank you. It was in relation to days for staff training and development, and it says that 44% of audit time will be spent on training and development, and I just wondered if this could be explained in the context of other services who won't be spending that amount of time on training and development.
Thank you for that question. We do have extra training and development this year because we're bringing in 2 new members of staff, and one of the people who's coming in will be actually coming in as a trainee and undertaking Institute of Internal Audit training. I have to say that 44% does sound like a very large amount, and I might want to go and have another look at that just to see why that is so high. So I will have another look at that and come back to you on that one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Comments? Okay, there are 2 recommendations then. Is this report agreed? Thank you. Members, just before we go to item 13, can I ask if any member has any questions on item 14? Will any member have any questions on item 14? No. Okay.
Can you stop the live stream, please?
Okay, members. Agenda item number 13 is the internal audit activity update. Again, it's Mrs. Wiley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Convener. So in addition to what we've just been speaking about, the other item that we have to report today on page 143, there's information there around the payroll continuous auditing that we undertake. We've completed that work for January. As part of that, we did identify a further 2 payroll entries that didn't have a national insurance number, in addition to the ones that had been identified previously, but we've now managed to get to the bottom of that. The reason for these has been identified as an issue in the digital recruitment process, and that's now been resolved, and there are now no items without national insurance numbers, and so that that has now been rectified and should be okay going forward. The other item that's in this report is the update on where we are with the individual recommendations from audits, and it's really good to see on page 144 that we now have only 13 outstanding items. The last time we reported to you, there were 33 outstanding actions. So I think it's really good that officers have managed to get 20 of those closed in the last couple of months, and that's probably the highest number of reduction of outstanding items that I've seen for a very long time. So that's really good news. But I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wiley. Any questions? No. Okay, then we'll go to comments. I have one. Just Cathy, if you just thank your team, that's excellent news to see that you've reduced them by 20. Absolutely excellent. And you know, you all do a fantastic job. And I actually said to the auditors a few weeks ago, I said we get excellent, very professional reports, but even more professional presentations at the committee. So well done, and just thank your team on behalf of myself and the members of this committee. Anyone else?
Thank you.
No. Councillor Devine. Yes, Cathy, sorry.
Yeah, could I just also say that the closing of these actions, whilst there is some involvement from my team, it's largely down to the services themselves, the people who have had to own these actions to get them done. So I think the thanks goes to them as well.
Okay, well, what I'll do is I'll put out an email. I'll put out an email to you thanking them, and if you can just forward it on to the relevant services, that would be excellent.
I will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No problem. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. It looks as if we're going to have a very busy June meeting. There's 8 reports coming forward. My goodness, that's quite a lot. Going to be extremely busy, but I do see that there is something in there that we were talking about earlier. Gosh, what was that? Housing voids. Yep. Yeah. That's good. Thank you.
Councillor Speed.
Yeah, I was just a way to come in there, and I can't remember your exact words, Convener, but I remember you giving a really bold statement and assurances around some of the reports that were due to come back in terms of this remit, and some of the areas that were coming back, such as voids. And I'm sure it was by June that you gave assurances that we would see reports. So yeah, definitely hoping to see some of that, because it has been a little frustrating at times when we are asking for updates and things are being delayed. So hopefully we will see.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Speed. I do have I have a meeting at the beginning of next week with the service to get some of the information that I need for that. So there will definitely be something. I think there will still be a fuller audit of voids that will need to take place during 2024-25, but I'm certainly planning to bring an update on what we've been able to do so far to the June committee.
Okay, that's reassuring. Thank you.
That's excellent, and obviously Councillor Speed as well. I think, Mrs. Wiley, we're now up to full staff strength. You've got your 2 new, because I think that was an issue before, wasn't it? Was a couple of staff had left.
They haven't started yet, but we're at the very late stages of the check-in that needs to be done, and I think we've got a start date for one of the people, which is towards the end of May, basically 4 and a bit weeks from now. and we're hoping that the other person's check-in will all be done in time for them to be able to start at the same time.
That's good news. Excellent. Any further comments? Okay, then we've got 2 recommendations. Is this report agreed? Okay, it just remains for me to thank yourself, members, and all the officers for their contributions today. That's the end of the business, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Can you stop the live stream, please, John?